through it and would like just to get your reactions to it. And please allow me to just govern you a little bit because I'm chasing the clock. Please just summarize your findings and your views on this. We don't have to go into the nitty gritties per se, but maybe if you can just give me your summaries, 2 minutes each person. How's that? Fantastic. All right. I hope you won't kill me. We're just trying to catch up on the clock. So in 2 minutes, 2 minutes each. Allow me to start with from the Herald, Chief Isdo Kwamambi. Sir, let me just hand over this microphone to you. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very sad that the editors who make the publication stick are given 2 minutes each, and the politicians who talk and talk and talk and talk so many minutes. How sad it is. But anyway, we are trained to shorten stories, and so yeah. From I'll just do a very short input from that. In that the reports are fine. They're picking on many things, but there's a very big missing link. Who is making the media corrupt? Who is making the media corrupt? Who is bringing the brown envelope? Who is capturing the media? So it doesn't only go to editors. At times editors don't even know what is happening out there. The brown envelopes go between the reporters and the politicians. And in the line, they'll tell you that there's another envelope for the assistant editor, another envelope for the editor in chief. But those envelopes don't get to us. We wouldn't want them, but we would only know. How do you know about the brown envelope if it doesn't get to you? You see, that's where the issue is. So I think going forward, it's a collective action for all of us to come up with the media that we want. It must be a collective action. We must also not look at the media from a perspective of the private media and the so-called state media and everything. The issue of ownership is critical. Who owns the media, and then what is the editorial policy? Outside that framework, we will just be talking and talking and talking. I think I'll end there for now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, dear Mr. Isdo Kwamambi. All right, so now let me hand it over to the Zimbabwe's Convergence News Editor, and that's Madam Phyllis. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm impressed by the report. It has actually highlighted what we've always been whispering, or what has always been whispered. And my reaction, maybe I will touch on the issue of sexual harassment. Everybody becomes silent. There's pretense. And it's very sad that the perpetrators are known, and in some cases they are protected. And I'm very happy to say for Zimbabwe, we now have a sexual harassment policy, which was initiated and started operating in 2022, that's last year. And I'm happy to report that, although more needs to be done, I'm happy to report that is late, do I say late or early? It's about a month or so ago, someone was fired because they come forward of the policy. Yes, more needs to be done on the sexual harassment front, and I just wish the media and government could join hands and fight a real fight, not pretend to fight. And then on the issue of the new media, I'm happy to report that the partnership, yes, the training colleges and the universities have not, as highlighted by the report, have not done quite well in training a journalist who is ready to use gadgets for the new media. But I'm glad that there have been partnerships. Like, for example, I think Zim Papers has also been beneficial for the partnership with Women in News, where they've trained journalists on use of digital gadgets and digital tools to get our news out. So on that front, I think we yes, we still more still needs to be done, but I'm happy to say at least we started the baby steps and we are doing fine. And then I think what would be my final issue is there was talk of polarization, what. We have seen some spaces become no-go areas for journalists. It's unfortunate. I hope some of the politicians are still here, or they've all left. We have seen political spaces that have been closed to media personnel because they are from media house X or media house Y. And for me, I would have loved better partnership so journalists can work in peace. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Madame Phyllis, giving us your perspectives and your ideas there. Now let's get to hear from the editor-in-chief from the AMH, Mr. Kulonyati.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
I spent some time going through the report, and I don't think 2 minutes will be enough to, but that's what it is. I had actually prepared a presentation, and I thought context was going to be very important in this discussion. And in terms of that context, I wanted to talk about what we do at AMH. When you attend some of these meetings, at times you live depressed because you get a feeling that the industry is gone. And I wanted also that we get a perspective that, well, there's something that is being done, and there are institutions that are really trying to make sure that we professionalize the industry, and that also that Zimbabwe is not an island. Some of these issues that come up is not that Zimbabwe as a country there's something that is wrong with us. So I'll be quick with the background that I wanted to give. AMH, I know all of us know what it does, the publication that it runs and the teleradio station that is represented by Blessed here. We subscribe to the MCZ because we believe in self-regulation of the media, which focuses on building democratic practices through regulation by the media itself. AMH took the initiative to establish an editorial advisory board, which is chaired by a prominent lawyer, Much Masunda. And in that board, there's a practicing judge, Justice Chinembu. There's a medical doctor, there are 2 civil society leaders, and also there is an industry executive, IFCAS, Performer Standards Association of Zimbabwe, MD. And on top of that, the company is an ombudsman, a practicing judge, Justice Chinembu, who also sits on that editorial board. The editorial board serves as a sounding board for editors. They check our content all the time. They pick things that at times escape us. I remember yesterday there was an email from Masunda. There was one of our page one story. I think there was a mistake about a Latin term. Is it triple C seeking a declaration? I don't know how to pronounce it. And then we said it was seeking a. Was it? I think the word like it was. They were seeking. Is it an order or something? That's how the story came out, but it's different from the Latin term. So that's the benefit that we have from. So now we can reflect in terms of learning in the newsroom. And also last year, AMH, I think around this time, we started advertising, making our readers aware that if they get approached, but because now, because of different platforms that we have. We can have journalists going around masquerading as AMS journalists, seeking bribes from unsuspecting people. We've been running in all our publications almost on a daily basis, adverts warning people that when they see this, when they come across this, the channels that they need to, they report to an independent body, to the ombudsman. But interestingly, since we started doing that, no one has come forward to say our journalists have come to them seeking bribes. Maybe just going to the report and I'll run through it. Some of the themes that I just had an interest in was the rise in complaints that VMCZ is handling. And I said to myself, is it because our standards have fallen so badly, or because our people are now more aware of the mechanisms that they can resort to when they feel their rights are violated? Perhaps it's something that we should be celebrating instead of beating ourselves about. And then on the election reporting, I think polarization is something that has been spoken about. But of course, there are issues of access that perhaps during the elections, some parties didn't want to be covered by other publications, maybe because of historical reasons. But I think from this election, there was an improvement. I think ZANU-PF became more open because previously they are the ones who would bar us from their rallies. But with this previous election, things changed. Regulatory framework, I think this is something that has been spoken about. And then in terms of ownership, well, there are always controversial issues about. But if you remember, I spoke about AMH setting up an advisory board which insulates editorial from owners. I don't get to interact with the owners perhaps until we go to board meetings or to editorial advisory board meetings. I think in the report there is a specific issue about Gerard Wilosha buying a stake at AMH. And I'm sure this is something that you read our newspapers. If you see the platforms that have been asking questions about the recent FIFA ban on Zimbabwe, which was caused by the SRC, I think the publications that have been more critical than anyone else are AMH publications. Because Gerard Wilosha doesn't get to know what the AMH is going to publish the following day about what is happening in football. And we've been very critical about that. And that can tell about that, how ownership affects the professionalism. In terms of salaries, well, I think the world over, the issue of COVID really affected. I think for our publications from during the COVID times, I think print runs we had to literally stop printing our newspapers at some point, and it went for several months. And now we're on a recovery mode. And interestingly, during COVID, people had shifted into subscribing to our e-paper. But from the information that I get is that now people are now demanding the physical paper, which is now a premium product because we have to. The e-paper is cheaper because it's cheaper to produce. For the e-paper, I think the price of the e-paper is double of the price of the copy that you get on the streets is double of the e-paper. But people are actually now, subscribers are now coming back, and our print runs are actually going up. And also the issue of salaries. You will know that the biggest consumers of our products in terms of advertising and also in terms of subscriptions is the government. And the government still pays in dollars, and that will explain why most publications are still paying their employees in partly in RTGS and partly in US dollars. Because the biggest advertiser is the government, they will pay in RTGS and the subscriptions are paid in RTGS. Yes, we are getting something from the streets in terms of US dollars, and this is why the salaries are partly paid in US dollars. And I think this is something that is being corrected, and we'll also find ways of improving our sustainability. Things are going to improve. I think I will stop there, although I still have a lot to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much there, Mr. Kolwani. All right, now we move to our HSTV chief, and that is Blessed Msana. Your perspective.
Thank you very much. So I'll just deal with a few issues that I think are important. The first for me is that most reports on the media tend to be very academic, and sometimes lose. They do not speak to the real issues that happen on the ground. For instance, you would want to ask, how do we define polarization? You know, how do we say that the media is polarized? How do you arrive to that conclusion? Because where I sit, journalists move from state media and work in the private media, and they move back and so on and so forth without any problems, right? And there's an issue that my elder here Isidro spoke about, the issue of ownership. I think that is the issue that we should really talk about, because I know, sitting in state-owned newspaper, right? They know the truth, they know the ethics. The journalists there are not unethical, but they cannot operate any other way. You know, they know that they have to balance the story. They also have to talk to Chamisa. They also have to do this. They know that, but they're not going to do it basically because of what? Because of ownership. So for me, it's not polarization. It's just a difference between the truth and the lies. And this is the issue. It's not about polarization. There's also a tendency of people saying that certain things have not been covered or are not being covered in the media because they have not read about them. Because their choice of media that they access does not cover those things. But it doesn't mean that they are not being covered, right? So, like, one political leader here was saying that the issue of abductions have been ignored and they're not covered by the media. And you ask yourself, which media are they reading? Because these things are covered daily when they're spoken about. So the media does not cover. The report says something about covering ministers and elites, but I don't think it is the truth. I don't think that issue that was included in that report is factual. I mean, have you read the Standard Community, which talks? It's a whole section that is dedicated to talking to communities. Have you watched HSTV Voices? Every Friday we go on the streets and ask people to speak out their minds. Have you watched it? You know, have you gone inside the Herald and looked at community stories that they write? Apart from the front pages, of course, the front page is mostly probably their elites. But I know that the features desk of the Herald, Zimbabwe papers, they go to communities, to rural areas, and they cover and they allow people to be heard. So sometimes research maybe it also starts from a polarized position. I don't know, but then I'll talk to the issue about resources, media resources. Now, media does not have the availability of resources is scarce, and also the salaries are poor. But in the world over, people who are corrupt or people who receive bribes are not generally poor. I mean, we need to agree on this. The people that have received bribes are extremely rich people in most instances, right? You'd see a CEO of a huge corporate being fired because they received a bribe. Is it because their salary was poor? Even some of the journalists that we have heard who have been fired over receiving bribes, they have plush homes, they stay in borrowed and stuff like that. So for us to sit down and to try and justify bribe taking to poor salaries. In fact, those guys who have poor salaries, who have actual real poor salaries, the students on attachment, the GTs, because they've not even made their names in the industry, and they don't even know how to get the big stories, are actually not even corrupt. But they're the ones who have the least salaries in the industry. And the guys that take the bribes actually drive big cars and stay in better houses. So I just wanted us to demystify that. And maybe just also to talk about, we need to understand, as journalists, I'm sure we've all studied and stuff like that, but there's something that is called the normatives of the media, right? The normatives of the media. If there's a problem at the media house in terms of control, and in terms, we might know the ethics, we might know everything, and still get it wrong, because those who control the system will always dictate in the manner in which they want it to be. In fact, most people say that the professional level in the newsroom ends at news editor level, right? Above the editor and stuff, there's a political appointment. It's basically because the owners will appoint people who they think will pull in the direction that they want. And I list my case.
Wonderful. Please let's give a round of applause for our wonderful editors giving us their very valuable perspectives and perceptions. Looking at some of the key issues. I hope our rapporteurs have managed to capture some of those issues on reports tend to be academic. Yeah, we think we need to look at that more because we are, as the practitioners in the industry, we're the ones who get to read these reports and think, okay, we're not quite understanding what lingo is being used there. It's very academic, it's being more practical. Some of the things that have also been raised, sexual harassment needs more attention from our practicing journalists and editors here present. That a question that always comes up: are we corrupt as a media? Have we been corrupted? Are we receiving those brown envelopes? And how best can we go about it? Thank you so much to our panelists that have been here. I don't know if there's anything very burning before I release you, and that you needed to bring out before we get into the next panel. But these really were the perceptions. We just want to really hear their opinions of the report, what they saw, what they felt actually stood out in terms of the report. Wonderful. All right. Please allow me to release my lovely editors. Let's give them a round of applause as they come through. Since I know you have a question, but I'm also just landing. Please save the questions. We will try and get a question and answer session in the second half. Allow us just to try and catch up because we still do have quite a bit in terms of our program this morning. What's actually in our afternoon. Okay. Now allow me to call upon two very special ladies who are representing our community-based organizations. At this juncture, I'm going to ask them to actually come one at a time and stand on the podium and give us their presentation. Once again, please allow me to infringe on your time rights and just ask for a very brief presentation. So as the members of the public, we would love to hear the perceptions on state media in Zimbabwe and what needs to be addressed. Please allow me to introduce to you Sandra Matendere, who is the Zimbabwe Women Against Corruption Trust. I think that's where she's from. Please let's give her a round of applause as she comes through. Madam Sandra. All right. So her organization is a non-profit organization that's mandated to campaign against corruption with a focus on its devastating impact on women and girls in Zimbabwe. Let's give her a round of applause as we hear from her.
Good afternoon. Okay. Thank you very much, Sasa. As you have heard, I'm Sandra. I'm Sandra Matendere. I'm from Zimbabwe Women Against Corruption Trust. We are based in Epworth and we have some presence in other provinces like in Midlands, Shoreham, and in Manicaland. Okay. So we work with marginalized communities. On my presentation is based on the state of media ethics and professionalism in Zimbabwe. A professional and ethical media is essential in strengthening democracy, promoting transparency and accountability, as well as ensuring that consumers get timely, accurate, and verified news. Professionalism reduces the spreading of fake news. Journalist reports should be truthful, accurate, and fair. Therefore, it is crucial to uphold these principles, especially when reporting sensitive issues or news of public interest like elections. Professional media promotes gender equality in reporting. However, we note with great concern the poor coverage of women in the media. When they are covered, they are inserted in back pages, and the coverage is usually negative. I want to agree with what was presented earlier by Linda Masarira. Professionalism of a journalist is compromised when one aligns himself or herself to a political party. Neutrality is very crucial as journalists, but as consumers, we are not seeing much of neutrality in the media. Uh, Professionalism in Zimbabwe media landscape has been largely eroded by poor economic performance. The employers themselves are struggling. Companies are not advertising their products, and most media houses don't have the capacity to pay their employees a living wages, which then gives rise to bribery and corruption. I think the issues of brown envelopes have been alluded on earlier. Due to poverty, journalists may be manipulated to write stories and suit uh, stories that suit certain narratives, and this reduces the quality of news. I have the privilege to interact with a lot of journalists who are freelancers, and they actually say they receive these bribes because they have economic hardships at home. So these things are happening. Graft in the media industry is so rampant due to these bread and butter issues. Some journalists are allegedly requesting fees from their sources for a story to be published, which is a high level of unprofessionalism. Do you know there are some sources who doesn't know that if you just submit a story and it has to be published without paying anything. Some journalists are charging a fee for a story to be published, but sometimes the editors doesn't know these issues. Consumers are becoming so selective when it comes to reading, watching, or listening to news channels due to these credibility challenges. Uh, Journalists who could not be absorbed in the mainstream media, they have resorted to start their own news platforms, and most of them are not registered or affiliated to any institutions such as PMCZ or ZMC, which foster professionalism. We have, although there are these challenges, we have to acknowledge that there are some online news platforms that are doing well. I know there are a lot of examples of online news channels that are doing great in terms of their coverage. Most online news platforms are suspects of spreading misinformation and disinformation. The reason probably being that they are not bound by any rules, and sometimes these media outlets are sometimes lazy, such that they take stories from the mainstream media platforms and fail to acknowledge the sources. I think most of you have seen this on online platforms. You can see a story from the mainstream, it is on another channel online, and the same story, they just remove the name of the writer of that story, which is very unprofessional. Technological advancements have lowered difficulties to enter the media industry. Anyone with a smartphone, whether trained or not, can start an online news platform, hence lowering the professional standards in the media. It's difficult to distinguish the trained and untrained journalists, especially here in Zimbabwe. Some journalists are quick to publish stories without verifying the facts, being inspired by the need to have more viewership online. As consumers, we become victims of misinformation. For example, during COVID-19, a lot of fake news was shared in the media, even in the mainstream media, and it instilled fear amongst the public, such that people became selective to avoid reading or listening to this news. Before, during, or post-election period, fake news was also shared. Consumers starved to get facts. My personal opinion is that the level of fake news, which was spread during and after this year's election, will have a long-term effect on voters. We might experience a voter apathy in future elections because people no longer believe in the process. Journalists sometimes fail to give facts of what is really happening during and after elections. Journalists have a crucial role to play, tell the story as it is without any bias. The public wants to know what is really taking place. Quote the constitution where necessary. People want to know what is happening. Is it constitutional or is it not? So these facts, they can be unpacked by journalists. Safeguarding of minor children and other vulnerable adults is not being respected by some media outlets, especially those unregistered ones who are operating online. Despite the challenges, despite the challenges in the media industry, we acknowledge the work being done by some institutions that are investing in training investigative journalists in the country. I know VMCZ, IDT, and MISA trainings on information and disinformation is also crucial as it promotes professional reporting. What needs to be done now? Provide refresher courses for journalists, regularize all online media outlets so that they are bound by media ethics, capitalize more on resource mobilization strategies, be innovative. Viewers should pay before reading online stories, be creative. Content is money. Learn to multitask, invest in personal equipment to do consultancy work during your spare time to boost income, invest in fast checking tools, fact checking tools so that you release information that is factual. Strive to promote gender balance in your reporting. I thank you.
Once again, please let's give a round of applause to the beautiful Sandra Matendere, who is the founder of Zimbabwe Women Against Corruption Trust, ZWACT, which is a non-profit organization. Some really, really powerful observations there coming through, and I hope all of us as the journalists in the room have taken note. There's one point that I particularly intrigued me, which is online unregistered journalists stealing stories from mainstream journalists, but that also happens the other way around as well. Some of the registered ones also do steal from the online guys, and they've known to report to. But that's a story for another day. But thank you so much for that, for your perspectives there. Please allow me to introduce to you Samantha Spanda, who is an award-winning human rights defender and internationally recognized speaker who has been working in the areas of disability for over 8 years. She is the founder of Signs of Hope Trust, a grassroots non-profit that champions the rights of people with disabilities, coming to give us her perspective. Let's give her a round of applause as she comes through. All right, maybe she might have just stepped out. All right, allow me to move. I will come back to her when she does come back. All right, so please allow me to move to the next part of our program. I am trying to catch up with the time. We're getting into something very, 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 very exciting, which is the fact-checking and key ethical challenges in Zimbabwe. And we do have two very keynote speakers here who are going to be coming and giving us their views and perspectives there. Allow me to introduce from ZimFact, the director, and that is Mr. Chris Chinaka. Let's please give Chris a round of applause as Chris comes through. Now, Chris has over 2 decades of work at Reuters International News Service, where he was the agency's chief correspondent in Zimbabwe since 1995. He has over 30 years of experience in journalism and is one of Reuters' most experienced reporters in Africa, which is very exciting right there. More news about Chris. Okay. Okay, I was trying to find her profile and it had run away from me there. Okay, we will begin on this. It's still the same session. Please allow me to introduce to you Precious Chakasikwa. Now, Precious is a VMCZ's Media Complaints Committee acting chair, a legal practitioner and partner at Cantor and Immerman. She holds a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of Zimbabwe, and she chairs the Population Services International Zimbabwe Board and is the vice chair of the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. She's a member of the Women's University in Africa Steering Committee, a board member at the National AIDS Council, and is a trustee at the Law Society of Zimbabwe's Compensation Fund. We are looking forward to hearing your perspectives. Please, let's give a round of applause, Precious Chakasikwa. Thank you, madam.
Thank you very much, Madam MC. I realize that I need to update my profile. So I've been asked to give my reactions to the report from the perspective of the Media Complaints Committee, for which I am the acting chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the researchers for a very well done piece of work, very well packaged report that touches on many important aspects. But I was zeroing in, obviously, because of the capacity in which I'm before you, on issues to do with ethics and from the perspective of the MCC. From the report, you will see that the report analyzes the 2022 annual media complaints report published at the end of last year by the VMCZ, and it gives some of the statistics from that report. And what we are able to see from that is that from 2021 going into 2022, we saw 100% increase in the number of complaints that were made before the MCC. 2021, we received and dealt with 15 complaints, but in 2022, that number doubled to 30 complaints. Moving forward into 2023, the statistics currently show that we have to date received 22 cases or 22 complaints against media players. We don't know what the figures will look like at the end of the day. So when you look at the numbers, one can conclude that the situation on the ground is not improving. We are not getting any better in terms of adhering to the ethics and the code of conduct that we all subscribe to. But Mr. Nyati brought an interesting dimension to this to say, does this really mean that we are getting worse? There are more violations? Or it simply means that people have become more aware of the platform that exists for them to bring their complaints for adjudication? I'm not able to provide an answer at this point in time, but what I can say is that the numbers are increasing. When we look at the code of conduct itself, and we look at the most violated provisions of the code, the trend that we saw in 2022 has continued into 2023. We continue to see more violations on the provision or the clause in the code of conduct that provides for fairness and accuracy. So far, I've said that we've dealt with 22 complaints, and of those 22, 18 have been against that provision that deals with fairness and accuracy. I'm not too sure whether this means that there is a need for more training in this regard. There is need perhaps for the VMCZ and others like bodies to ensure that there is greater effort in trying to publicize the provisions of the code of conduct itself. The reasons for the trends that we are seeing are unclear, whether it is because of some of the reasons that have been mentioned in the report, the poor remuneration, the polarization of the media or politics or society. Maybe this is what is informing some of the trends that we are seeing from the complaints that are being received. But the majority are on the provision regarding fairness and accuracy. There are some complaints in respect of the other provisions of the code of conduct as well, such as plagiarism. We see a lot of this in respect of photographs, where somebody uses another person's photographs and they do not acknowledge the source, and then we receive complaints to that effect. But some of the gaps that we are seeing in the cases that have come before the MCC are in terms of court reporting. We've had this year a lot of complaints regarding cases that are stories that are written based on court cases. It appears that there is a lack of understanding of court processes, and in some of the cases, there is a lot of subjective casting of the cases, subjective casting of the headlines, which gives a false or a subjective, outcome to the cases. You find that sometimes you have a case where somebody is alleged to have committed fraud, and they appear in court for initial remand, and the story that is then published or the headline that is cast to such a story is serial fraudster, or as a conclusion is already
Yeah.
reached for a matter that is
Yeah.
pending in court.
Yeah.
That is
Serious
becoming
issue.
rampant. We are seeing a lot of that coming through to the MCC. Or we have cases where, as you know, court cases take time to conclude. There are a number of court appearances, particularly in criminal cases, before a matter is actually concluded. But a story is written regarding the first court appearance, and there is no follow-up story. The matter goes to court, and maybe the subject of the story is eventually acquitted, but there is no follow-up story to then conclude to say this person who was charged with this crime has gone through a trial process and they've been found not guilty. The only story that you find is the first story that is written where this person is labeled a fraudster, and there is no indication or no story written thereafter to show that no, in fact, they were not convicted of the crime that they were charged with. So those are some of the gaps that we are seeing. And as the MCC or as the VMCZ, we usually then take or use the MCC report to inform the training needs of media players. So we are seeing that there is a serious need for training on court reporting, because there is a lot of cases that have come our way where there are complaints regarding court reporting. So this is a call perhaps to those who are also involved in training to ensure that there's some a focus on training on court reporting. I would like also to concur with some of the recommendations that have been made in the report, particularly those that are made to the VMCZ, focusing more on training. As we continue to see more and more violations of the code of conduct, we can only but conclude that there is need for greater training. There is need to publicize the code of conduct. I don't know how many in the room are familiar with the provisions of the code of conduct. I don't know how many in the room have a copy of the code of conduct on them that they can refer to time and again when they are faced with a challenge. I also think there is a need to publicize the code of conduct not only to media players but also to the consumers of the news. Because when you look at the advert, I was looking at the advert that is placed by the VMCZ in most of the publications that subscribe to it, calling on people to file their complaints. It usually asks that, are you happy with the media story or are you unhappy with the media story? Is the story unfair, untrue, or do you feel that it violates your rights, or that there was a violation of the media practitioners' code of conduct? This is calling on consumers of news, members of the public, to say, do you think that a story published in the newspaper violates the media code of conduct? But how many people out there that are not media practitioners actually know of the existence of the code of conduct and of the content of the code of conduct, for them to then say, this story violates the code of conduct? So I think that a lot of the cases actually go unreported. There are times when I open the newspaper myself and I see a story and I'm like, I'm sure a complaint is gonna come in respect of this story, and no such complaint comes. It could be very well be because that members of the public are unaware of the existence of the code and also not aware of the content of the code of conduct. So I subscribe to the recommendations made in the report to ensure that we increase our efforts in training and in publicizing the code of conduct. As I've said, the gaps that we've seen from some of the cases that we've handled within the MCC should inform, the training needs that need to be focused on going forward. So again, I wish to thank you for a very comprehensive report, and for us as the MCC, we remain available to adjudicate on matters. I want to comment also on one aspect of the code that spoke about the proliferation of online media or online content creators. We have seen quite a number of complaints against these. In fact, for 2023, 11 of the 22 cases that we've since received are against online media. And with a lot of them, we've had issues in bringing them to account. They are not of, they are difficult to pin down. They are difficult to locate. We don't know what their domicile is. It's in the clouds, it's in the air. Sometimes you can't even tell who the actual personalities behind some of these outfits are. We had an interesting case before us where there was a complaint against one of these online publications domiciled outside of Zimbabwe. They agreed to appear before us, virtually, but they wouldn't disclose who they really were. We needed names because when we publish our reports, because as MCC, we do not have the power that the courts have. We don't have enforcement mechanisms really to the adjudications or the decisions that we make. So for us, when we publish the report of the MCC, it is in a way a naming and shaming mechanism to ensure compliance going forward. So we usually work with names. We want identities. We want to know who these people are that we are dealing with. And in that particular case, they would not disclose, who they truly were. The person who attended the virtual meeting simply indicated what they were attending in a representative capacity, representing the editors who were not named, representing a board of the organization who were not named. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing from the online content creators, because sometimes their identities are hidden, which makes it very difficult for us to ensure compliance with some of the findings that the NCC makes. I think for now I'll end here. My colleague Chris, who also sits with me on the MCC, will come. I know you speak more on fact checking, but you may also want to touch on some of the issues that we are seeing from the complaints that are coming our way. Thank you.
All right, please let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much, Madam, for giving us that run through and the fact checking, as well as key ethical challenges that were raised and found within the report. Allow me to call upon Mr. Chris Chinaka, who is ZimFact Director, and like I mentioned earlier on, 2 decades of being at Reuters International News Service, and is one of most celebrated African reporters on the continent. Please let's give a round of applause to Mr. Chris Chinaka as he gives us his report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm happy to be part of a discussion, one which refreshingly is not out to find fault with other people, but to find solutions for our profession. I'll be very brief. I've been given 5 minutes. I may take 3. And the issues that I would like to raise for discussion are basically what can we do around misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. What can we do as a profession? That's our challenge, and not what others can do. So the first thing that I offer that we do is that we must recognize the scale of the problem. So gone are the days when we are in the newsrooms and we simply map how to cover stories. Unfortunately, that world is gone. The new world also recognizes that yes, you will discuss and map how you want to cover stories, but you must also map how you want to try get people to fight misinformation and disinformation, because of the sheer volume of misinformation and disinformation that we face in global. And our last elections, if we learned anything about it, is how misinformation and disinformation can affect and does pollute the information ecosystem. So that's the first thing that I'm asking colleagues that we do. That in our individual or corporate positions and organizations, we do one thing, to recognize the scale of this problem. Because if we don't recognize the scale of this problem, then we don't start looking for solutions in that direction. The second thing that we can do and should do is that we need to revisit our systems, to revisit and establish strong quality control systems in the newsrooms and in our various spaces, in order that we're able to confront and work around institutional and both institutional and individual biases, which may help or becomes almost a vehicle for misinformation and disinformation. We must recognize that as individuals, we already have our individual biases sometimes, which allow us or to treat information, even suspect information, and move it as if it was not been. So if we don't do that personal and corporate audit of our own attitude towards certain information, it becomes difficult to revisit and establish those strong quality control systems. That's the second thing that I suggest we do. The third thing that we can do, and which the rest of the world, which has recognized the scale of the problem, they've revisited their systems. The third thing we can do is to recognize that fact-checking desks are emerging as part of the answer to fighting misinformation and disinformation. So particularly for some of our institutions which run really multiple platforms, there's absolutely no excuse why there can't be a desk or a point person who is dealing with misinformation and disinformation and becomes a sounding board. What are we doing about this thing? Because goal 2 is the world in which you care about only what information you have pushed out. You must care about what other information the rest of the public is meeting and what interventions you can make. And one of those interventions we can make is to fight misinformation and correct misinformation, even around issues you may not have published yourself, but you recognize that information is what people are consuming. My fourth point is that we need to do self and corporate audit of the skills we have, right? And this becomes very difficult for many people to simply look at yourself and say, am I adequate for the challenges that we are facing? If I am inadequate, what are the gaps that are there and what can I do about them? The nicer thing about a self-audit is that you're answering that to yourself, right? You may be doing so as an individual, if you're running an individual platform, or you could be doing that as a corporate when you're running. And when, in most cases, the answer should be that there are gaps. That should be the answer. Because there are gaps that are emerging around us in terms of skills. And thank God, the answer to is very close, because we can close those gaps, right? By recognizing it and then working on closing the gaps in terms of what skills we have, and what we need to be doing. And then my last point is we must implement. Right? One of the weaknesses of men and women is that we think so much, we plan so much, we do so little. Right? So it's all in our hands, right? It's in our hands. I made 5 points. The first one was that we need a strategy that recognizes the scale of the problem. The second point was that we revisit and establish strong quality control systems. The third point was that we recognize that elsewhere, fact-checking desks are emerging as part of the answer to that. The fourth point was that through a self-audit at a corporate or individual level to address the point. And the fifth is that we do more than talk. So help me God. Thanks, guys.
So once again, please let's give a round of applause to our director from ZimFact, Mr. Chris Chinaka. You can tell from the way he speaks. Chris, are you lecturing these days? Because you can tell that the level of information and knowledge there would befit someone who is a senior lecturer in the industry. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now moving to the next part. I'm going to ask my facilitator, and that's Nigel, so please come and take over on this one. And I've just been advised one of our delegates needs to dash back to Malawi, so we'll start with her. All right, and that is Madam Anastasia Ndlovu. So we're going to start with you. Please come through. I'm just going to call them up as Nigel is coming to the front. Right, so let's call upon Madam Anastasia to come through. We also have from MISA Advocacy Officer, Malvin Mukundu, and one of my very good friends. I think this man, when he sees me, wants to run away because I used to terrorize him a lot on television. But he's such a good friend from the ZRP Assistant Commissioner for Nyati. Please let's give them a round of applause as they come through.
Okay, thanks, Zaza, for steering the ship in the last sessions. I think this session we want to reflect on the safety of journalists and to help discuss the linkages between, obviously, journalists can only be as professional, ethical, to the extent that they are safe, and to the extent that the environment they're operating in is conducive. So we've got Anastasia who was involved in an incident, and we just want to appreciate some of these occupational hazards and to appreciate how that can be averted as we promote media freedom and as we promote a conducive environment for ethical media. So you can just briefly share your.
Okay, good day everyone. As you heard, my name is Anastasia Ndlovu. I'm based in Bulawayo. I currently work for Voice of America. It's very difficult on how I'm supposed to address this, but what I can say is it was like during the campaign period when all the political parties were campaigning. And it was on a Sunday. I had gone to work in Gweru where Chamisa had his first cleared rally, officially cleared rally. So on a Monday, I was working with friends at the press club. Then the press club chairperson, Pamela Stuso, came and told us that there is a story out there. In Bulawayo, there is a street, 5 Street, it's 5 Avenue that has been overtaken by the ruling party. They allocated to their party members. So in that area, they harass vendors. So when we rushed there with colleagues they had left. The ZANU-PF members had left after assaulting a few vendors. So when we were in the process of interviewing the vendors, they came running and they asked us to stop recording what we were doing, and they started assaulting everyone there again. So that's how I got involved in the assault by the ZANU-PF members. And I reported my case to the police. And I'm glad to say that I've been communicating with Ms. Tinyati on the issue, because since July, the day of the incident, I reported to the police. Up to today, none of them has been arrested, but they have all the information. So 2 weeks back, we had a meeting with Mr. Nyati organized by Mr. Zimbabwe. He promised to work on the issue. By end of day, the investigating officer called me and they said to me they are failing to locate accused number 1. So it will be difficult for them to take the case to the court. But I have lost trust in our Zimbabwe Republic Police, as I said 2 weeks back. That surely, with all the information that they have, failing to arrest someone, knowing the capacity that our Zetarapi has, I'm disappointed. And from what Mutswanga has said today, it concludes to me that it will take time for my case to be resolved, because I feel the state, which is the ruling party, is protecting the accused person. From the way he spoke, he already has a challenge with VOA, but I am accredited journalist in Zimbabwe, fully accredited, and I was on duty. So our security is zero in Zimbabwe. So if my security is at zero, what about the citizens? What purpose does it serve to go and report a matter to the police who are supposed to secure us, and nothing is done to resolve the challenges? And I call upon the political parties. It's unfortunate Mswanga is gone. The few that are there, it's good to respect journalists. And there is one thing that you cannot take away from us, is that we are the fourth estate. And being the fourth estate, party positions come and go. Today you might be somebody, tomorrow you'll be like no position. And I'll remain a journalist. So it doesn't make sense. And this thing of them barring media houses from covering certain events, it's a story on the other side. Or do they want us to go back to the trenches like we used to? I can do that, but it's not good. It's good for everyone to respect each other according to their positions. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your ordeal and for being as honest as you could, insofar as your feelings towards your trust levels, rather, and confidence in the process. But I believe there has been some incremental changes, some incremental gains that has been owing to a process that MISA, Zuj, Zinef, and other colleagues within the auspices of MAS have been leading, which gave birth to a police media action plan. So yes, we still have these unfortunate incidences, but you may want to speak more into some progress that has been made, and how also can we begin to rebuild this trust, where as our sister here was saying, she now feels it's a foregone conclusion. How can we continue to steer up the conversation?
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think we were in Blawayo 2 weeks ago with Assistant Commissioner Nyati, and it's an issue that came about, and it was coming right when we were going to be commemorating the day against impunity for journalists. So she felt that there had been a slow pace in terms of dealing with the issue, and of course that does not work well, especially when we are saying that we want to arrest impunity against members of the media, and that maybe something was not yet done, could have given the feeling that it promotes impunity. But I want to echo the sentiments that you have already shared, that as MISA, as ZUJ, ZINEF, MAS, under MAS, we have been clamoring to implement the recommendations made in the police media action plan. And I think, like you said, there's been a lot of movement about that. The fact that Assistant Commissioner said that there would be a response that day on the issue, and that a police officer called also shows his own commitment and perhaps the police commitment to dealing with the issue. The fact that the person has not been found is yet that the transgressions are yet to be accounted for, of course, raises legitimate suspicions on a part and also on the part of the media on whether the safety of the media is guaranteed. But I think we are on the right track. We continue to engage. The fact that during the just ended elections, we had almost zero incidents perpetrated by police shows that they've also taken this issue seriously. I think we had two incidents where police were said to be involved, but who were being given orders by the presiding officers at the polling stations, but the police officers did not implement some of these unlawful orders that had been given by the presiding officers. Shows that there's increased awareness by police on the role of the media. If the media were at polling stations and they were duly accredited, there was no need for them to be removed from doing their duties. And the fact that no one was removed by police shows that police are now aware of their duties. I think one of the complaints was that the commanders are okay, but it's the guys on the ground who are troublemakers. And in these two incidents, it shows that the boys on the ground actually refused or were reluctant to carry out an instruction that would go against the operations of the media, the lawful operations of the media. It shows that maybe there's that awareness. It's a positive that we have, and we can only continue to defend that space through continuous engagement, through commitment to investigating. I think one of the recommendations as well is that if there's an issue, especially if it's perpetrated by police, there's a commitment that that issue will be investigated and those involved will face necessary sanctions. So I think it's one of the recommendations where we have to move towards that if there's an issue and it's investigated, then those who are responsible for it, if it's seen that they interfered with the lawful and professional operations of the media, then those investigations should follow sanctions. So I think where we are, I cannot say everything is perfect, but I can safely say that there's a marked improved in attitude, where there's an attitude to go towards dialogue, there's an attitude towards engagement, and there's an attitude to listen, to solve problems that have been reported. I think I can also say the same about political parties, because we also engaged political parties under the banner of MAS, where we obtained guarantees from them that members of the media will be safe. Of course, we in Anastasia's case, then we did not see that happening. But I was not here when the political parties were there, when Minister Mtwango was here, so I don't know if he addressed the issue. But as far as I know, there's an open door policy after the parties committed that if there's an issue, you must continue to engage. So from the way I see it, we can achieve zero violations of journalism, of journalists, if we continue to engage, if we continue to defend the space that we have created, and if we continue also to be as professional and ethical as we can as the media. So I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's room for these issues to be ironed out, as long as the platforms of engagement that have been established remain there and are supported. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Marvin, and for the sustained engagement. I'll come to you, Asko Mnyati. I think from the police media action plan, there's this commitment for sustained training and retraining and equipping of our police officers. Has that also been happening? Because I noticed so far the engagement have been mainly with journalists, but yes, during the elections we engage with some ground commanders, but we still need to cascade into the police officers. Has that been happening? Is the training now, has it kick-started or it's still in the pipeline?
Thank you very much, Nigel. First, I want to acknowledge the research by my young brother Blondoloz in the Saudi with regards to the safety and security of journalists. Yeah, it's work in progress. Remember, Rome was not built in a day. And also the fact that in our country, the issue of the safety and the security of journalists is a contentious topic, to be quite honest. According to the research, which I have just briefly gone through, almost 30 cases, they highlighted 30 cases. But when I tried to check, I was checking with my team about those cases reported, I realized that most of the cases, to be quite honest, they don't involve the police. They involve other players, they involve other parties. And with what has happened between the media bodies, from the Zimbabwe Media Commission, Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, Media Institute of Southern Africa, ZINEF, ZUJ, I've realized one issue which we must also spearhead. It's pointless, to be quite honest, for the police and the media to engage. Then we have a work relationship which is almost tip-top, but with other players we have a challenge. And at the end of the day, the reports, they come to the police. And when the flag comes, it comes to the police. But you find that we will not be the instigators of those actions. Like in the case of Anastasia, we are now conducting investigations where you find that sometimes we don't even, get cooperation. You see, so those are some of the issues which we deal with as the police, and we have realized with our partners from NISA to say we need to do more in terms of engagement. And when we talk of engagement, we've realized that previously as the police, we had challenges because we're engaging at the apex level, at the command level, at national level with NISA, ZUJ, MAS, and ZINEF. But the problems were continuing. And then we said, what can we do to address the problems of journalists being harassed when they do their job? When we, for example, have demonstrations, when they go to our various areas in the country. Then we said, let's go to the ground. Let's meet the people who are responsible for these youngsters. And it has worked. Since January, we have traversed the whole country.
meeting police commanders at provincial level, district level, and station level. And it is assisted because police officers now appreciate the work of journalists. Yes, we have got a diverse work environment in terms of the way journalists operate, in terms of the way police operate, but so far so good. But I'm saying, after realizing that these are the issues which are coming up, we now need to also engage, starting with the parliament. You remember, we've got a parliamentary portfolio committee responsible for the media. What are they doing? Let's challenge them. They need not just sit in parliament, they must go to the ground and meet even the police, the political players, the church. You know, it's also surprising. Like recently, last year and this year, this is the little church where people were fighting for leadership. The other faction decided to call the media to say we're going to make a very prominent announcement. Then when this other faction also got wind of this incident, they came up and said, you guys from the media are trespassing. We are going to make a report. And the police can effect arrest because these guys are trespassing. And you know what? It's the police who are now at the center. But we're not part of this dispute. Yeah? And it puts the police in a very tight corner. So these are the issues I'm saying the media and the police must address. And then you also have some activities where you find that the police, we are also invited to provide security, but we don't control or we don't coordinate those activities. And sometimes journalists are chased away, but people say, it's the police which chased us away. So we're saying, let's find common ground. That's why I'm saying we need engagement, not engagement because of a talk show, but real engagement on the ground, so that we will solve these issues once and for all. Because what we have done, the police, with the MISA, with the ZMC, with the MAS, can also cascade to other sectors of the country. And it's very possible, provided people are genuine. And I mean it. If people are genuine, we can do what we've done because we've set a benchmark, which I believe other countries are now saying we also need to replicate what the Zimbabwe Public Police has done with the bodies such as MISA and other actors. So it's possible, but let's have real action on the ground. And also, for us as journalists to speak as one. Yes, people have spoken about the issue of polarity, but we also have a challenge because of the issue of technology. And it's also affecting the police because everyone with a smartphone is not claiming to be journalist, but they don't have ethics whatsoever. I remember we went to Wangi, where my brother Perfect stood up and vehemently defended the profession because somebody was saying, you guys protect us because I'm a journalist because of the fact that I own a phone. I'm now filing stories. So why are you not recognizing me as a journalist? And Perfect said, no. We've got a code of ethics. You see? Yes, there might be challenges, but let us not compromise ethics. And also, we now have new scenarios where it's also affecting the police, where you have got these community radio stations, some of them being run by volunteers, who are also saying, also want to access, places where activities are taking place and refer our stories. Yeah? As the police, we still guided by you guys. How do we deal with this situation? Yeah? I know when we went to Blawayo, Malvin and the Machinaka, they undertook to engage the Zimbabwe Media Commission so that these issues can be addressed. Because they also affect policy. To be honest, because somebody will come and say, these guys are claiming to be journalists, can you come and arrest them? Because they are not accredited. I also want to appreciate that during the elections, with no instances affecting concerning the police and the media. But of course, we've had other issues. And also, let's take note. Sometimes you guys are also performing your duty, and then something unforeseen crops up, like what happened in Waterfalls recently, when one of our colleagues was operating a drone, and then this drone, and we don't know what happened, it then fell on a certain church premise. Then they decided to make a report. They said he was trespassing. And the police had to move in and they tried to negotiate because they were refusing to release the drone. So these are some of the situations which put the police on the spotlight. but we will not be part of the problem. That's why I'm saying we need engagement. We need to continuously find each other so that we resolve issues affecting the media, the police, and other sectors of the economy. Remember, what has been said in this room, it's a fact, whether people like it or not. As the police, we fully recognize the immense role of the media in our country. And we wanted to make it clear that what has been said in this room is clear, that the media mirrors our society. Yeah. It mirrors our society. So the way we do things, the way we relate to each other, the way we use the language also mirrors our society. So we definitely need to work together as a team. Of course, from the policy side, we recognize that the media, they are the fourth estate. The media also recognize that as the police, we are a secret arm of government. If we do that, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have problems. Because some of our messages, for them to get to the people, it is through you, the media. That's why we are saying you are part of us. Like currently, we are fighting this menace of drug and substance abuse. And unfortunately, we went to one of these towns with MISA, and then we got a report that one journalist was also dabbling in drugs. I'm telling the truth. This is on record. So these are some of these which we also want to work as a team. How do we address these issues, especially with these upcoming youngsters? Yeah? They are also affected. Yeah? So we need to address it as a team, not only focusing on arrest, but as a team, how do we assist them? As we speak about the safety and security of journalists, even the issue of ethics, I also get concerned sometimes where you have some young journalists trying to engage, but they are not getting the necessary mentorship. And where somebody phones you, you realize that this person is very crass. Yeah, the language which is used. Then you ask, who is your mentor? Then sometimes I even offer to assist. I say, can I assist you? I'm telling you the truth. I say, I can offer my service for free to assist you on how to be a good journalist. Because myself, I'm also a journalist. You see, so we need to work together in terms of the safety and security of journalists, and also in terms of mentoring these young stars. Because when you're a journalist, you also promote your safety and security by being humble, by being disciplined, by being ethical. No matter how the situation is, let us remain ethical. I know, I've spoken to Perfect about this in the Niger, to say in our country, as the police, we are fully aware that there are some politicians who want to compromise the profession. This is a fact. There are politicians who want to compromise the media fraternity. In the process, they make them clash with the police. Then they enjoy it. Yeah? You take, for example, a politician who wants to move around being accompanied by journalists. When he confronts certain activities, he wants to do it in the full glare of the media. And when something happens, he wants to be arrested in the full glare of the media. In the process, is affecting the credibility of the media. So we must also watch out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much, as community. Well, we are doing very extremely bad for time. We'll take just a round because all the other sessions did not even have a plenary. So we are taking just one plenary for all the sessions, including this one. If there are any quick interventions, reflections, or you are now hungry, you want to. Yes, Nyati, not ask Nyati.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kabila. I'm not too hungry for a quick intervention. I'm commenting on the report of the media ethics. On the media ethics report that's presented here this morning. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, I do so without the benefit of having gone through the actual report. So at this stage, I'm totally ignorant of what's contained therein. But from the presentation and from the general discussion thereafter, I am rather surprised that there is no reference whatsoever. Mind you, this is not the first time that the status of the media in Zimbabwe has been reviewed by researchers. And 10 years ago, in 2014, Professor Jonathan Moyo, then Minister of Information, in his wisdom, appointed the Information and the Media Panel of Inquiry. Unfortunately, that report is now lying, well, gathering dust in some office in the ministry. Despite the numerous and momentous recommendations made in that report, I'm surprised that no reference is made whatsoever. But maybe there's reference in the actual report that was presented here. And I'm not saying this because I was the chairman of that particular. To go a step further, I was amazed. I'll just focus on two issues out of the presentation. I was amazed by this statement that, and I want to quote verbatim, most journalists are now resorting to brown envelopes. Most, I'm worried by use of the word most. Is this factual? Is it true that most journalists, if I look around, most of these people here are now resorting to brown envelopes? Well, that is frightening. And if this particular statement is true, then there's need for very serious action on our part to address that particular problem. Because we don't have time, I'll skip some of the points that I wanted to raise. Now, another point that worried me personally was the statement that the journalism of Mr. Nyarota in 1989 and the journalism of today are totally different. I think there is an element of fallacy in this, and I will explain. Yes, there may be differences in the practice of journalism, especially the negative aspects of journalism as practiced today. I will explain. Yes, with respect to the widespread dissemination of fake news, there is a total difference. Because there never used to be such dissemination, deliberate dissemination of fake news in 1989 without fear either being sued or fired for whatever outlet you're working for. So, and I will explain further. Yes, perhaps with regard to the alleged widespread acceptance of brown envelopes, yes, there's a difference. Because this never used to happen. That 85% of journalists should be said to be accepting brown envelopes or that they are corrupt. A further point, yes, this could be true, but there's a difference now. With regard to the what I regard as the extremely crude propaganda that is widely disseminated these days, especially by those journalists affiliated to political party, whether it's official or not, but there's a certain affiliation to political parties. I'll cite an example. Wrapping up, yes, that's what I'm doing. My favorite headline in our newspapers is this one. There will be the mother of all political rallies tomorrow. How the journalists know in advance that the pending rally will be the mother of all rallies? That is crude propaganda. It cannot be true. But we have generally accepted this kind of treatment of news. Finally, I want to comment on the issue of fact-checking. I have a very cynical perception of the function of fact-checking. I think I mentioned this last night. I regard it as the official outsourcing of one of the critical functions in a newsroom, the sub-editor's desk, which is an internal fact-checking mechanism. Now we have people who make a living now outside the newsroom through offering their services through fact-checking. They are sub-editing our stories long after they've been published. In other words, closing the door, the gate, after the post is voted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You noticed that it was predominantly stuff from your sessions, which is good because people were listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Allow me to qualify and qualify two statements here. In the report, we noted that most journalists are taking broad representation. My elder mentioned that. So what we did, if you picked on our methodology, and from the interviews we conducted with participants, we picked that there is an element of financial inducement. And that element of financial inducement that is given to journalists, whether it's transport allowance or maybe news stories, because Brown is just giving people financial resources to get positive coverage. So the reason why we use the word most is because from the participants, most agree to that statement, to that fact. Then another issue is that of polarization. So you realize that polarization in simple terms is division in opinions. And when it comes to media coverage here in Zimbabwe, you really need to read all the dailies to get a clear picture of the story of the event covered. So because of that, the media is polarized. And no need to do an academic thesis on that one. Let's take it from the coverage perspective. Some media houses in this country are acting like campaign posters for political parties. And because of that, it's polarization. What else qualifies polarization more than that?
All right. Okay, the last two.
I wanted to respond to the presentation here. The director where Women Against Corruption, if I'm not mistaken. As far as coverage of women-related issues or women in the media is concerned, I wanted to highlight that I think it's of utmost importance that we engage and establish a relationship. Mostly, I'm more inclined towards issues to do with Parliament, that the parliamentarians are still new at this point in time. We engage them. We try as much as possible to build a relationship with them, and that's where the genesis of coverage will come from. And probably as far as other organizations like yours and others are concerned, one thing that I've noticed is that organizations tend to have their people.
when it comes to coverage, in regards to stuff that you'll be doing, you have people that you reach out to for trips that have per diems and a lot of money, not people who are passionate about writing and putting out what you stand for as organizations. And it's only when it comes to platforms like these that we come forward and we're like, there's less coverage. I think it's important to engage with people who are already doing that, and there's more capacitation in that regard, rather than having so-called people who are taken on organizational trips among others when they are not even focusing on that kind of reportage. So there is need for improvement on the part of organizations. That's what I've observed so far.
My question goes to Londolozi in South. When I went through the report that they did, I realized that they did not report about the state of media and gender. It was not like they put any emphasis in that particular category. And it is a cause of concern. That's why I have to ask why they did not also do a survey in that aspect. Because even in reporting, you'll find that most women in politics, I'll speak about politics because that's my field, are rarely covered in the media. Even in parliamentary debates, women do debates in parliament. They are rarely spoken about what they've also spoken about in parliament, but you'll find male parliamentarians being reported about what they've said. So there is a deliberate and systematic alienation of women in politics and the media, and we didn't see anything about the state of media and women in politics. Thank you.
Okay, well, you respond to that, and then like I'll also respond. I don't think there was any question to my panel. So after Law and Blessed, we'll be breaking.
Okay, I'll give Madam Linda a very short response. If you look at the final section on our report, there are issues that we referred to around sexual harassment, and most of these issues mainly came from our respondents. And from the information that we got, in as far as the challenges that women are facing, one of the biggest challenges that women face in the media is that of sexual harassment, particularly in the newsroom themselves and also in trying to get information. But I think we also mentioned the issue of harassment of women online, particularly the framing of women, where we're saying that women are marginalized either by inclusion or by exclusion. You find that in some cases where they are included in the media, they are given a peripheral kind of coverage. But even in some cases, they are totally excluded, and their successes are not actually mentioned. So I think that is how I will respond to Madam Linda.
Thanks.
Okay, so I just wanted to note when journalists go and cover news, they cover things that are newsworthy. I mean, it must be important for people to notice that it must be a story for it to get space. News must not be driven by gender. You know, because if we are going to do that, newspapers are going to be out of business. Because you've got to look at newsworthy. I've always argued that instead of people coming to tell the journalists who to cover and who not to cover, they must capacitate people to understand that if we give you an opportunity to stand there, you must deliver something that has an angle and that is news. Grace Mugabe would stand up and would be covered because she was newsworthy. Yeah? But even sometimes when you cover the president of this country, you might fail to find an angle. Because some of the things that he says, you know, it's not about positions, it's not about gender. It's about whether it's newsworthy or not. Then blanket statements like some newspapers or media houses have become campaign posters of politicians. It's wrong without being specific to stories. So I like my elder here, Nyat. He gives you a simple example and says, the mother of all rallies. He argues on fact, not on conjecture. So if a news or a media organization is reporting on something that is factual and you think it's supporting a certain political party, then in your conclusion you just say this is commissariat journalism, this is voyeurism and stuff like that, without specifically saying On this day, the HSTV ran this story, which was false and was campaigning for a certain political party on the basis of APC. I mean, this is how we begin to encourage each other and to keep account of each other, is it? But instead of just saying, they are biased, without even pointing out factual things. So I think it is time we start doing that, to point out on factual things. And the last thing is that journalists have been forced into self-censorship, right? The reason why Shadaya has become so popular is because he has refused to fold to self-censorship. He speaks about things that most people, or maybe without abusing the word most, he speaks about things that people whisper in the corridors, and they are afraid to speak out against those things because they will then be labeled. You then get the words misogynist and stuff like that being thrown out, right? So for instance, I'll just give you an example of what happened in here today. I responded to a panel, and the quickest thing to do was to attack me, not what I said. Said, I was avoiding talking about you all this time I was talking because you supported. So next time I do not have to speak because someone will tell you you support this and this. So these are the things that I'm simply talking about. When people report and then they begin to be attacked on their person and their families, in the next instance they will not do their work. And when they don't do their work, you say they've been bribed. But because they're afraid of being attacked now, they're also protecting themselves. You understand?
Okay, thank you very much, Tara. And let us also give this panel a round of applause for the engagement and submission. At this point, this is 10 past 2. May we come back at 20 to 3 so that we are able to squeeze through. In the afternoon, we are